one of the things that disturbs me about, again, as I've been in this campaign, it seems like, again, this financial thing, nobody even knew about it a month or two ago. It seems like we're lurched from crisis to crisis. 2 months ago, the crisis was our energy policy. Now, that's on the back burner. I don't want to be in a position where 10 years from now, we're back in the same place. Like we're, again, totally beholden to foreign oil. And at that point, if things continue the way they are, if we don't get on top of this energy thing, we won't even have the money. Even if these countries would sell to us, we won't have the money. China will have the money. India will have the money. So this idea of lurching from crisis to crisis, it just doesn't seem like Congress is doing its job in keeping an even hand over everything. So what do you see, certainly pensions, things like that, our Social Security system, what kind of crisis do you see in our future with this, and how do you see Congress dealing with averting another crisis of this magnitude? Or actually, I would assume with the pensions and securities, it's a far larger crisis.
Well, what you can do when you replace Ms. Pelosi in Congress, is to push for actually funding our Social Security responsibilities and Medicare in the future. You know, the government has doubled its debt overnight by taking on Fannie and Freddie to the area of $11 trillion of federal debt. But when you count the unfunded debt, which is for all sorts of programs, including Social Security, Medicare, all sorts of other things where funding is promised, benefits are promised in the future, but no money's been set aside, the debt balloons to perhaps 50, maybe $70 trillion. So I think that to begin to fund pensions, to fund these future obligations, is really key. And it's not going to be easy to set aside the funds to do that, but it's being done in many countries around the world, and it's being done very successfully, and that will be part of the solution to the problem of needing future investment. We must divert part of the money that's just being handed out and put it into real savings, which is there for growing the real economy.
Now, do these private accounts you're talking about, are these, not private, that wasn't the word.
I didn't say anything about private accounts. That's
I'm going to ask a question
That's
about
a political choice to be made, but that is the governments around the world that are saving for the future. Some are actually doing private accounts in the names of people. So part of a worker's wages are set aside in an account for them and managed by a manager they select, and that's there for their future. Other countries like Singapore are putting together a government fund.
But
the government manages
money is set aside.
It's set aside investments that will produce income to provide for the pensions. So there's a lot of ways to do that. Right. The key difference is the United States is doing absolutely nothing to meet those future obligations. And so they're piling up year by year, getting very large to where it's clearly overwhelming. Right. Other countries are dealing with that, and the U.S. is not.
And I don't know how this fits in. I did bring up the privatization. Even when it's suggested that young people today be able to put aside just a portion of their Social Security, a lot of the Democrats just go up in arms saying that this will destroy the system, but the system doesn't exist for all practical purposes. So what do you think about allowing, especially younger workers, to take some of that money that they have to, that they're obligated to put aside in their own accounts? Do you find that to be a logical way to go?
Well, it's been very successful, for example, in the country Chile, that I know a lot about, and that's a country which, when it implemented that reform, gave its citizens a choice. You can either stay in the government program, or you can opt out of it, and all of your, and they took 10% of people's wages. We have 12.6% or something, so we're taking much more. The 10% of the wages just went into an account in that person's name, and it was managed by a manager they select. The government vets them, they have rules on them, but you can select the manager that you want to manage your pension fund.
And you can put it in anything you want?
Well, there's very limited choices to make sure they're soundly managed, but yes, they've now got choices from aggressive to very conservative, and people can make some choices for their own future.
But it's stocks and real estate, or is it just financial instruments?
It's in stocks, it's real estate, it's outside the country, it's inside the country, it's infrastructure projects like toll roads, all sorts of things can be. Okay. Yeah, you can use that to fund the development of the country, which has happened in Chile. Okay. But it was interesting when they put that in, people were given the choice. About 90% chose get out of the government program. We want to have it where we have our... But the other thing they did that was really inventive was they said, well, but people have been working for quite a while. They've built up some obligations in the government program. Sure. So the government actually quantified that and handed to that private fund a bond, which the government pays off over a long time, which is the government's obligation of the old program. And so wow. It got set up, and it's now a very strong reason that Chile is a growing dynamic economy, because it has the savings set aside to meet the retirement needs of its people.
Do you think we have the political will to do something like that?
Well, I think if you're elected, we'll have one more vote out of the 435 in the House right. to do something significant. You know, there's certainly a difficult division within the Congress, within the two parties, as to how this sort of thing should be handled. Mm-hmm. But I'm just suggesting that that is a way that you can, and it's the only way that you can avoid the problem that's coming to the U.S., because the U.S. Social Security system is based on a so-called trust fund. And what happens is you pay Social Security taxes in. Part of them, a growing part, is just handed to somebody else who's already retired. A small amount of it, the rest, is handed to the government, which spends it on other programs. Right. And the government says, well, okay, we'll give you a bond Social Security trust fund for the money we've taken and spent on other programs. But it's all been spent. And all that's in the Social Security Trust Fund is a promise from the U.S. government. Well, where's that money going to come from? Right. It has to come from taxes people pay in the future. They may or may not pay the taxes. Nothing's been saved and set aside. Right. All the money that comes in from that program goes out immediately. We know so that there's nothing being saved. That's what I'm saying. That would be a very fundamental reform. Mm-hmm. Because I'll tell you what is really coming behind this that's needed. The United States must maintain its creditworthiness. The U.S. is on the edge of losing its creditworthiness in the world.